Okay, I think we'll make a start now. So, hello, my name's Maria Taylor, and I'm the International Director of Training at CPI. I'm joined by my colleagues today, Ollie Frith, who's our Head of Consultancy, and Lindsay Munro, one of our Global Professional Instructors, who's going to be monitoring the chat and the Q&A boxes for us. So, welcome to this Classroom Culture launch webinar. It's really great to see so many of you have taken the time to join us today, and I want to really give a big shout out to those of you from Australia who I think have had to get up really early this morning, so you're very welcome. The Classroom Culture programme's been in development for about the last 18 months, so we're really excited to be able to finally start telling our customers about it. So, looking at the agenda, what we're going to be looking at today is, for those of you who aren't familiar with CPI as a company, I'm going to start by talking a little bit about who CPI is and how we deliver training. Ollie is then going to give you an overview of classroom culture. He'll be talking about the content and the training programme itself, and then where it sits within the range of CPI offerings that we have for education and the range of delivery options that will be available for you. So before we start, just a little bit of housekeeping. Feel free to use the chat box to make any comments. And if you've got any questions, just pop them into the Q&A box and we will be answering those at the end of the presentation. So let's get started. So Ollie, could you move to the next slide, please? So at CPI, what we do is we provide professionals with the knowledge and skills so that they can identify and prevent and de-escalate a spectrum of behaviours, whilst ensuring that they maintain the care, welfare, safety and security of their colleagues and the people in their care. We believe in the power of empathy, compassion and meaningful connections, and it's a philosophy that's central to everything that we do. CPI is the largest provider of workplace evidence-based training in the world, and we currently work with over 17,000 organisations, and you can see where we are on the map that's in front of you. And currently we've got 38,000 work-based certified instructors. And CPI was launched over 40 years ago now, and during that time we've trained more than 15 million participants. And as I just said, we've been a training provider thanks Ollie, for more than 40 years. And initially our training programs concentrated on managing crisis events. But over the years, and in particularly probably maybe the last 5 to 10 years, that focus has really moved away from managing those crisis moments to actually the identification and de-escalation of situations so that they don't actually reach that crisis level. And to support this focus on prevention, CPI purchased Pivotal Education in 2017. Now, both companies had similar philosophies and values, and the pivotal content aimed to provide participants with strategies to enable them to be proactive rather than reactive when supporting low-level disruption and distressed behaviours, and that they did that through the development of a relational approach. So what we've been doing over the last few years is listening to customer feedback about the pivotal programs, and some of those overarching comments were that, you know, while staff engage with the programme, they sometimes struggled to implement it in their own classrooms. The approach was great for driving change from the top down, but sometimes staff said that they felt they were being blamed, and some staff felt that they were being left behind. Or some schools and colleges said that they did really well initially at implementing the programme, and then as staff left, they weren't able to sort of induct new staff into the programme, so the whole philosophy became watered down. So over the last 18 months, we've looked at that content, we've taken on board what customers have said, and we've developed the Classroom Culture programme. Our approach has been very much to try and improve and simplify the content, and then provide a programme that's targeted to support individual practitioners. Alongside that, we've also looked at how CPI can provide additional and ongoing support so that the programme is effective in supporting staff so that they can create a safe and respectful culture in their classroom. And I know Ollie will talk about that more a bit later. Could you go to the next slide, Ollie, please? So one of the differences about CPI is our approach to the delivery of training. We still offer the traditional inset events, which we all know are a brilliant opportunity for engaging staff, team building, and cascading knowledge and skills. But what we do know from customer experience is that insets alone don't facilitate change in an organisation, let alone any change that's sustainable over a period of time. So to try and address this issue, CPI uses an instructor certification train the trainer model. So I know some of you will be familiar with that model, but for those of you that aren't, I'll just explain it. So what happens is a CPI Global Professional Instructor trains a member of your staff, and it could be one member of staff or it could be more depending on the size of your organisation in classroom culture. The programme contains a train the trainer element, which supports the certified instructor in how to deliver and facilitate that programme back in the workplace. That certified instructor is then able to deliver the training to anyone who's employed by your organisation, whenever or wherever that it's required during that licence period. There's no limit on the number of staff that the certified instructor can train. And so this gives the organisation an extremely flexible and cost-effective way of delivering training. The certified instructor has an in-depth knowledge of the programme content, which helps to promote effective learning transfer to your staff in your organisation. And that certified instructor can be used as an on-site workplace resource or coach, and that really helps to embed and sustain change within your organisation. Could you go on to the next slide, Ollie, please? So looking at our delivery options, most of our programmes have an online element which provides participants with the core content of the programme. That's an effective method of delivering training because it allows participants to process the content at their own pace. It ensures consistency, and that maintains the validity of the programme. That's then followed up with a classroom element where the instructor facilitates the practical application of that content that the participant has learned online. And that could be face-to-face or it could be a virtual event. So where there are online and classroom elements, we refer to those programs as blended programs. And as I said earlier, there's still the option for the traditional classroom face-to-face training, either from your own in-house certified instructor or one of our global professional instructors. So I'll hand you over to Ollie now, who'll go into more detail about the programme itself.
Thanks, Maria. Yeah, so what I want to talk to you about really is looking at these 5 core principles that we've used to build the Classroom Culture programme. And really how we look at supporting our colleagues, supporting staff to initiate that change right from the grassroots level. So the change in their classrooms, which then ripples to a change in departments, which then grows to a change in the whole school and then beyond. And so whether it's an academy chain or a local authority group, it really has to be about that level of consistency that all adults come together, where we stand shoulder to shoulder, looking and walking in that same direction. So these 5 principles start with consistent, calm behavior. It's the first principle, and it becomes the foundation of everything that we need to do. If we can't get this bit right, then the other principles, the other strategies, the other ideas really start to fall away, because we start to present this sort of do as I say, not as I do culture, and that doesn't work for long-term change. So we really need to look inwards, where we turn that spotlight and look at adult behavior. We look at how we regulate ourselves, how we model our expectations. So that commitment, that level of certainty that we give to our students, of consistency, that this is how things are going to be. This is what this looks like. This is how our relationship exists. And this is what you can expect from me. That's my commitment, my gift to you as my student. And so how we can really start to support adults to become better reflectors, to become better at self-regulating, and really starting to teach our students how to do that in turn. So that has to be at the heart and soul of everything that we talk about, that commitment of consistent, calm adult behaviors. The second principle starts to stack on top of this foundation. And what we really want to do is look at how to create and establish routines and habitual behaviors that aren't just a lip service or a tick box that we can say, well, we've done a routine, we've talked about this is how we line up at our school, but it's actually sustainable. We can embed it, we can entrench it, and so it becomes part of the fabric of the school. It doesn't sit on the shoulders of a superhero senior leader who's running around reminding everyone of how we do things. It really becomes part of the culture of the school. So it isn't dependent on individuals. It's celebrated by all involved. And so those routines really do become sustainable. With COVID experience, I'm sure all of you have navigated that COVID response in a way that has heightened your use of routines. We've had to, because of safety. We've had to physically distance. We've had to wear face coverings. We've had to do all sorts of things, put students in bubbles, and manage the way in which we move around the school in a really different way that we've ever had to do before. And I think what's really been highlighted through that experience is the value of key routines that we can really share. And so this second principle really celebrates that, the value of routines, but also changing a routine and taught or expected behaviors so they become habitual. The third principle really looks at first attention being given to best conduct. And what we mean by that is very much around identifying the behaviors that you want and drawing attention to that. So we want to make behavior superstars out of the young people who are already doing the right thing. They already turn up to school on time, well equipped, uniformed up, that they know how to regulate their behavior. And we need to prioritize those behaviors. I'm not talking about ignoring inappropriate behavior and letting it escalate, but giving my first attention to the behaviors that I want. And so we draw attention to that, because if my learners who work with me want my attention, and they do, then I'm going to teach them that the best way, the quickest way, the most effective way to get my attention is to do the right thing. Very often what we do is we have this sort of teacher eye where we notice the bad stuff, the wrong stuff, and we nip it in the bud. But really what we're doing is teaching young people that if you want my attention, you do the wrong thing, and you'll get my attention straight away. So we need to really look at that third principle that identifies recognition and value and the importance of importance around giving that first attention. The fourth principle looks at scripting difficult conversations or scripted interventions. Very often we don't have a plan. We don't know how we're going to intervene in a situation. So we see a problem. The plan is that I'm going to intervene and it's going to stop. Well, as you all know very well, I'm sure, it doesn't always go to plan. And if we've got a script that not only do we know that plan, that script, but our learners know it as well, and it's very clear, we provide that sense of certainty. We give them that reality that this is how this conversation is going to play out. And we don't waver from that, and we revisit it. So it's not one and done. There's no magic words here. It's very much around providing that stability, that certainty to young people that we work with, that when this happens or this behavior goes in this direction, this is the response you're going to get. And again, it's repeated. The adults come together. So we create that sense of consistency through the scripted interventions. And then finally, the fifth principle that we want to talk about is very much around restorative approaches. We're building this platform where we start for the first principle, we get the 2 and 3 and 4 in place, and we provided that foundation to then be able to build and repair relationships. As you all absolutely will know, you can't repair a relationship until you've built a relationship. And so the fifth principle very much assumes 1, 2, 3, and 4 are in place robustly and starts to look at how do we manage behavior intervention? How do we manage behavior response in a way that is dignified, but also reasonable and proportionate? And when we look at that and start to value the relational approach at the heart of what we do, which of course, the vast majority of educators that I work with and talk to, we're united by the same thing, which is being driven by that relational approach. We all care about the children that we work with. We all care about making a difference. And so what we need to do is really take the blinkers a little bit away from that honourable intention and just consider the peripheral impact of our decision making. And then we can start to really build a reasonable and pragmatic response to behaviour that doesn't just try and deter behaviour, inappropriate behaviours, but it actually starts to teach young people how to make change to their own behaviour choices. So they're the 5 principles that is absolutely front and center, framing everything that we do with the Classroom Culture program. And what we want to do is build a program that supports you to deliver this within your schools. As Maria talked about, that certified instructor program, is that we've learned over the years that we can send trainers in and they can deliver a great training day, but is it sustainable? Because often what happens 6 months, 12 months, 18 months later, business as usual has revisited, has resurfaced. And so what we need to do is very much empower you as schools to be able to sustain that change within the culture of your school yourselves. And so the culture program that is being launched that we're talking about today very much looks at the principles being evidence-based. And so we can justify why we do what we do. We can explain that there's some research that's gone into it. We can look at the cognition and the way in which the brain works. We can really consider the evidence around how young people operate and think and process and regulate their behaviors, and marry that up to the principles that we're talking about. Historically, we've talked about a top-down approach where the leadership team defined the culture they want, and then it's very much this is what we're doing. And what we wanted to do is look at supporting from the ground up, from that grassroots approach. So every single educator, every single professional is trained to the same standard, to the same experience, and gets that same messaging, that same philosophy. So they're empowered to make that change within the classroom culture, or the culture of the corridors, or the culture of the yard, or the playground, or the lunch hall. So this isn't just about classroom practice, this is whole school change, but every single individual will be responsible for the culture of their working environment. And so we build towards that organizational change. Within our program, we provide, as Maria mentioned, there's that blended approach. And so with the online portion where you experience the content, there's also a planner, and that doubles up as a bit of a workbook, but also a journal, a reflective journal that you can use and revisit as you roll out and implement these ideas throughout the school year. And each term you can revisit the ideas. And so it's not a sort of one of those courses where you can just, you respond to the requests and then you put it on your bookshelf and forget about it. We've designed this to be a working document to really support those conversations that you will continue to revisit. You know, nobody expects us to magically change behavior and fix behavior in your school. So that's it, we've done behavior, we can move on. It takes time to embed the ideas. And so the planner that you'll have to support that will take you through those conversations. And really that final point about traditional inset, just looking at is getting 100 staff or 50 staff in a room for a day and just throwing a load of slides or throwing a load of ideas at them the most effective way to implement change? And I'm not sure it is. And over the last, and certainly with COVID, there's been some incredibly innovative ideas about changing that narrative, changing the way in which we share resources and share training and share new initiatives with staff. But it was happening before COVID. You know, lots of schools that we work with were just coming up with lots of different ideas about the way they can flip that narrative and really start to consider how effective inset and CPD and the delivery of it is going to be, because what we want to do is make sustainable change. The Classroom Culture program looks at, yes, we've mentioned it's a blended program, and it's split between the 5 modules, the 5 principles, because again, if we throw everything at once, it's not digestible. So we need to break it down. And so it might be that you've got the option of just looking at principle 1 in the first term, for example, or the first half term, and then each half term you could revisit or look at a new module. And then on the final half term, there might be a coming together to just celebrate or look at what changes being put in place, but it's very much geared around that idea of ongoing implementation support. And so it's split into the 2 parts. We've got the instructor certification program, where there's the online content. It's about 3 hours, and then the trainer part of that they will identify either face-to-face, or if you want, you can have a virtual experience of that, for creating a certified instructor to really lead the project within your schools, so that they can allow staff to experience the virtual content. And then there's a classroom portion where it's very much around looking at the content, understanding how to implement and embed that change in each individual practitioner's working environments. And then for onward delivery, we've got that exactly the same. So that's for the instructors, and then for the instructors to then deliver. So for you to deliver to your schools, the same sort of format, is that you've got that 3-hour online experience, digest the content, and then come together in a classroom portion to really reflect on how people feel about the content and how they're going to make that change happen. What I want to do is just give you a bit of background around CPI and the training suite, and how that fits into that behavior continuum. So we can start down at the bottom, and this is a model that all of you will be very familiar with in terms of that waved approach. But if we start down at the bottom with a sort of pre-escalation, where there's no problematic behaviors, it might start to include low-level disruption, but even actually before disruption, just that idea of what do we do in the culture of the classrooms that is going to prevent behavior issues happening, because prevention is the cure, right? So the more we can prevent, the less we've got to respond to. But we also have to identify the fact that it doesn't matter how much we improve the culture, how much we prevent behaviors, there's always going to be that some students that start to escalate their behaviors for whatever reason. And as you know, there's a variety of different reasons of why young people might do that. And so then we're starting to look at some higher level disruption that's not resolvable from just a scripted intervention. It's not resolvable through just a quiet word. It builds to that. It forces us into a situation where we do have to have a more considered approach. And then obviously, finally, we've got that escalated behavior where young people are in crisis point, where those behaviors are high risk to their safety or someone else's. And you will know this model being very much around that universal, that this is for everyone, that targeted approach that is for kind of the identified individuals, and that specialist approach that's required for the minority of young people. And many schools, particularly mainstream, will not need, thankfully, to have to go near that highest level of approach. And so what we wanted to do is really create programs that mapped the behaviors that you in your specific organizations encounter, because whether you're a primary school or a secondary school or a PRU or an FE college or a special school, essentially you need to be able to look at the behaviors that you need to respond to and build an action plan around how you're going to support those behaviors, and ideally then get to a point where you can reduce and ideally prevent those behaviors. And so the 3 programs, this is where classroom culture comes in at that universal level. This is for everyone to really build that foundation. And for the targeted approach, we've got verbal intervention that looks at de-escalation strategies, that looks at when young people are at that point of escalated behaviors, what do we need to put in place that immediately gives them that support that they need to reduce the likelihood of them entering into high risk or crisis behaviors. And then finally, that specialist program is the safety intervention program that looks at what can we do around reasonable and proportionate responses to support the young people that are in our care to manage their behaviors, to regulate their behaviors, and then ideally sort of reflect and learn from those experiences. And so we can improve the likelihood or reduce the likelihood of those behaviors happening again. And so what I want to do is just share with you the classroom culture options, if you like, the customer journey map that are available to you. And there's 3 clear routes that you can come into to embed this program. So the first one, which is the one that we would absolutely recommend, is the certified instructor route, whereas essentially you send a member of staff to us to do that instructor training, and then the resources and the support is given and then taken back to your schools where the program is onward delivered. And if you wanted to go down that route, then there's a number of options, sort of bolt-on options or wider options that we offer. One of them being the health check. And essentially a trainer will come into your school and review the current climate, the culture, behavior response, the way in which adults are managing the processes, and make recommendations. Or you could have that experience post-training. So you could have it after 6 months and really start to reflect on what's improved and what's changed. And so those options exist. And we've also created a hearts and mind inset, because what lots of schools say is, the content is really valuable, but what we really need is that outside voice. And so if you want to, as a launch of the program, if you like, you can have a trainer that comes in and delivers that rationale of why should we do this. So we've got the content in the program, and then that hearts and mind inset really supports that experience of classroom culture. If you did want to go down that instructor route, then you can have a CPI trainer coming out and delivering that program to you. So there's a number of options there where the Classroom Culture program, either you could experience it with your staff blended wise, you could have them have the online experience, and then the trainer would come out and deliver the classroom portion. Or if you really wanted, you could have a full day of all of it, content and delivery in one. But as you can imagine, I think that's quite a sort of a content overload, but it just depends on how it works with your CPD plans. And again, you can have the pre and post health check with that route. And then finally, what we've got, just to forgive the trains that are buzzing past, the consultancy route, which is essentially we've identified that for some schools that route 1 or route 2 will absolutely be enough. And other schools, depending on where your staff are, where your young people are, where the processes are, you might need that extra level of support. And so we've got a bespoke consultancy avenue that you can have in addition to the Classroom Culture program. You can contact us and we'll workshop a way of building that support. So it might be some leadership work support, it might be some coaching, some mentoring, all of those avenues are available as well. So in a nutshell, for me, that's the journey map that you've got available to you. And so unless Maria's got anything else to add, I'm going to move to the Q&A. And I know that Lindsay's been monitoring any questions that have come up. And so what I would say is, if you haven't typed in any questions yet and you have some burning questions that you would like to ask now and get Maria or myself to answer, then we've got some time to throw them in the chat box. Or the Q&A box, should I say. So Lindsay, are there any questions that we've got that we can answer?
Yeah, questions come through. Ollie says, I'm currently a Pivotal Mapper instructor, but I'm aware it's changing to Classroom Culture training. Will there be instructor training to switch over to the safety intervention training updated content?
Okay, so I think Maria,
will I answer that one? So MAPPA has become what we're calling now safety intervention, and we have safety intervention programs for people who work with children and young people, or people who work with adults. So if you remember the triangle model of universal, specialist and targeted approaches that Ollie showed earlier, I think safety intervention, I think Ollie's just going to go back to it. So safety intervention is at the specialist support level. So that's where Pivotal Mapper sits. So Classroom Culture really does support all the models and programs that we've got within Pivotal Mapper. We took a lot of the best parts of Pivotal, such as the scripted interventions, limit setting, and put that into Pivotal Mapper. So actually it will put the meats on the bones, and it just gives you more underpinning knowledge for safety intervention programs or Pivotal Mapper program. So that there isn't a program that you can do to transfer, because it is a separate program. So I hope that answers your question.
I hope that answers. And I'm just looking, there's no more questions that have come up. Now, I know that Carol did put, are we able to ask questions? And I know Lindsay's answered that, saying yes, but you haven't sent a question in. Helen's saying thank you to Maria. So that I'm assuming that does answer the question. So I know it's Thursday afternoon. I know you're all absolutely exhausted after a week and getting to the point of end of half term. I mean, I think COVID presented a new definition of half term tired. And so it may well be that you've received enough information and you just can follow up if you wanted to with a phone conversation. I'll give the contact details up on the screen. In terms of next steps, my recommendation to you is very much get in contact with the team through the email address, through the phone number, and we can start to discuss how, support packages and what we can do to help. I'm just noticing that Lindsay, has Carol put up a question there?
Yeah, it's just come through. It says, just wondering, do you train staff in managing and regulating emotions in young people?
So, Carol, so that's certainly something that we can offer in terms of that bespoke consultancy. So the Classroom Culture program essentially builds the foundations for other training that is going to be more effective. And so what we've identified is that we have all sorts of training courses that are available, not just from us, from all sorts of providers, and they don't necessarily stick so well. And we've sort of looked at why are they not so sticky, and are they so dependent on people driving them individually in the schools. And so the Classroom Culture, it will provide that backbone, that foundation for all staff to have that increased awareness, that increased understanding about the principles. And then what we can do is build other training programs or other support packages on top of that. And so in terms of working with adults to support young people to regulate emotional behaviors, then that's something that certainly you can get in touch with us, and we could have that conversation around what that might look like specifically to your cohort, your staff, because as you can imagine, that feels like that's something that isn't necessarily just an off-the-shelf go through the program. So absolutely. Lindsay, are there any other questions coming through?
No, not at the moment, Ollie. No more have come through that I can see. Oh, no, just Carol saying thank you.
You're welcome, Carol. And so, yeah, so just we'll stay on for a little bit longer. Like I was trying to say earlier, I'm sure you're all kind of at that point where you are ready to sign off and go to your evenings. I hope you're not going to stay at work for many more hours, if any. So have a wonderful evening for those of you that are signing off, and for those of you that are watching this on a recording, please do feel free to get in touch with us at these details, and we can have follow-up calls. You can speak to the sales team, you can speak to some of the trainers if you wanted that, to really discuss how that program or programs can support you changing the culture in your schools. So thank you for giving us the time to tune in to this webinar. I really hope that's giving you an insight in the new program that's coming. We've got programs from September, and there's a schedule of virtual and face-to-face programs that are available now to book onto. And so if you want to have that conversation, then do get in touch.